So, hi guys. I was introduced to Rachel Liaw through one of my favorite people in tech, and he said, "You're going to be blown away by this software and this woman." And so, our first conversation, I asked you about your background. So, I'd love for you to just talk about your background first, because we're going to also open the room up to Q&A, because this is, if you want to know what the future of supply chain is, how we're using AI in supply chain, like all the things, you have like an incredible expert here. So Rachel, just tell us a little bit about your background, because I was like blown away that you even, this is one of the hardest pieces of software to solve, and you've taken it on.
Yeah. So, I have a pretty unique background in that I started my career in software development, doing natural language processing and AI. And then I decided that I would quit tech forever and never do software again. So here I am running a software company. And I decided to restart my career in the warehouse packing boxes. So I've actually done every part of supply chain, from packing the boxes, running production lines, QC, production management, all the way up through supply management, working with vendors, both international and domestic, financial planning, supply planning, demand forecasting, and every step of the process, I saw that there was a need for software. Not only was most of the software, or is most of the software in supply chain today built in the 80s and 90s, but it's not leveraging all of the great things like AI that we could be using today. And so that's the basis behind Fuse, was to fuse data together, bring it all together. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I also started a brand. So I've been in your seats as a brand founder. I started a baby brand called Parasol, doing diapers and wipes. So have done a lot of R&D and product design, manufacturing, market research as well.
What was your major pain points when you were starting a brand? Because I think that's really interesting to talk about as well.
Yeah. So I knew from my experience that there wasn't good software out there. And this was even like pre-Shopify. So we were still in like Magento land. Everything was like a custom built solution. If you wanted to like edit your theme, you had to like edit 2,000 lines of code. And so I was like, I think someone needs to make a shopping cart. And then someone did. So I was like, great, Shopify exists now. And I was like, for sure, someone's going to do this for supply chain. And no one did. So that's why I built Fuse. And the reason why I did that was, for Parasol, I actually built a custom shopping cart and inventory management solution all in one, because I knew there wasn't anything that I saw as like the future of inventory out there. And what I see as the future is everything talking to each other. There's no reason why your retail channels, why your wholesale channels, and your direct-to-consumer should live in separate environments. There's no reason why you can't share inventory and optimize across your multi-channel strategy. There's no reason why you can't use shared components across products in a very optimized format. Other than software. And so that's really the unlock that we do with Fuse.
And I think for context, we're going to play the video if it's ready, just so that they have, like, you can just take a quick look at the software and kind of what they do. So, I mean, what are the main pain points that people are coming to you for? Because I think that's like a really interesting to talk about.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that the main pain point of the year changes all the time. So, in the beginning, people say like, I want to learn how to do brick and mortar expansion, and then I want to learn how to expand into Target and Walmart. I want to learn, how can I do more optimization around my raw materials, of demand volatility during the pandemic, global supply chain snags. So I think the core theme that I got out of all of that was, a centralized place to have all of your inventory data so that you can make all the different decisions based on the problem of the day. Because I think a lot of times people overlook operations in a brand. And I think the hot topics are always like Gen AI, marketing, influencers and things like that, which are all super important for a brand and the storytelling of a brand. But ultimately, you're selling a physical product that's going to end up in someone's hands. And to make that experience smooth, like you have to touch all five senses. When they get that product, it has to be perfect, that experience. And that really comes down to operations. And so the name of the game of operations is always like putting out fires. Like I never have meetings on Monday and Tuesdays with our clients because they're putting out a fire. And so, I think that's the kind of like key for operations. It's reacting quickly to change, having resilience. And that really means centralizing data, having all of that at your fingertips so that you can make an informed decision right away.
And then let's talk about some of the differentiators of your platform versus others in the market, which is you were talking about ingredient sourcing, like that. And why did you decide that was a piece that you need to get into? Because it seems like already very complex to even just do this.
Yeah. I wanted something that was truly end to end. And like the whole concept behind Fuse is that we're fusing your data together. And, what I noticed was people were handling things like ingredient sourcing, raw materials, outside of whatever system they were using, because a lot of those systems were designed in an age where people were taking like, white label goods, putting their branding on it and calling it a day. Nowadays, as I'm sure many of you in this room know, selling a differentiated product comes down to really doing your homework, finding something, whether it's a key ingredient or some sort of part of the manufacturing process that makes the product unique. And so, for example, like my diaper company, we had the softest and thinnest diapers in the world. And we did that by importing top sheets from Japan and using a technology made in Belgium to create the thinnest diaper that did not need wood pulp. And so we were able to create diapers that were 3 millimeters thick, but just as absorbent as a regular diaper. And that's the kind of like differentiator that you need so that a customer comes back. Like some cheaper competitor from China on Amazon can't just copy your product and call it a day. And so that really means a vertically integrated supply chain. And that really means like, sourcing your ingredients, really working with your co-mans or whoever, whatever vendor you're using, your cut and sew factory to get all the details right, to make sure that you have control over every step of the process. Even if you're not owning those materials right away, knowing that they have that key ingredient there in time for production can make or break your delivery times.
And so in what categories are you doing this for? Because I think it's important. I mean, it's one thing to do beauty. It's another thing. I mean, I can't imagine you're doing this for every category.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty category agnostic. We don't touch pharmacy and fast turnover groceries, but we do have food and bev. We do have CPG. I would say CPG is probably our strongest category. It's like beauty, skincare, cosmetics. As well as some apparel, shoes, fashion, accessories. I would say we have a ton of shoe brands because shoe sizes can range very widely, especially once you add in like medium, narrow, wide. And so being able to forecast across those different variants, as well as, the CPG, going down to the raw materials is basically everything. I think it's about having a flexible system. I think a lot of times people think like my supply chain is unique, like we're doing it completely differently, but they all are variants of the same kind of supply chain. I think it's just that previous systems are not flexible enough to handle things like raw materials or omni-channel. Multi-warehousing, things like that, distributed warehousing. So I think for me, building a system of the future is about that flexibility of being able to pick and choose. Like, hey, today we have one distribution center, but tomorrow we're going to have 5. Next year we're going to have 20.
And then, so will you actually help with like the planning phases for strategically with some of the companies that you work with, and what stage do you work? Like, what's your ideal stage of working with brands?
Yeah. So, I mean, ideally, as soon as possible, having a system set up is the best route. That said, systems do take time and money. And so a lot of people choose to kind of wait until Excel doesn't work anymore. So I think that's kind of like a good starting point when your Excel planning sheet takes like 15 minutes to load and crashes every once in a while. I think that's a good time to really talk to us. I think another kind of point is when you have some sort of extra complexity, whether it is you're starting to source the raw materials or you're expanding into multiple channels like wholesale or retail. And yeah, adding any sort of complexity to the supply chain where it's not something, you can just calculate using simple math in Excel. You're really needing to think about the complexity, the volatility of your demand, things like that.
And so, talk to us about the predictive analytics and how people are using it, and just in terms of, inventory management, all those different things.
Yeah, so that's our bread and butter. That's where we started. We've always been like a predictive company, which I think it's kind of having its second wave now.
I love this. The AI is big. If you do anything in AI, products in AI.
Like AI since 2017. But, I think one of the things and one of the reasons that I started the company was there were so many great AI applications. Like I said, I started in software development. I was doing, natural language processing, which is a form of AI in foreign language search engines. And that was like in its infancy when I started my career. But by the time I started Fuse, we had Siri, we had all these great things, Google Translate that didn't exist before. And we have all these great technologies, but no one was applying them to supply chain. And what we started with was our demand forecast. So being able to ingest all of these different data points, including things like marketing promos, including like demand that's different across your channels, and starting to see like which products are really taking off, which products have high demand volatility that you need shorter lead times for, versus maybe a more stable. I used to use toilet paper as the stable product until the pandemic. So now I use like tampons and pads. And so, when you have a more stable demand, then maybe a longer lead time with cost savings makes sense. And so that's really what we're using the predictiveness for, is to figure out like what is your true demand, because that demand plan really informs the rest of your supply chain.
So give me an example of how you saved a company money from that piece of it, because I think that's a really, in terms of just being able to see the data and then being able to change lanes, I'd love to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. There's so many examples. Let me choose one. I think from the video you guys saw, we work with Margot New York. They're a shoe brand. They're one of our first beta customers. They've been with us for like 5 years now. And we've helped them reduce overstock by like a lot, and thus like about 70% for them, and then stockouts by reduction by about 40%. And the reason why they had a very, I think, unique then, but less unique now problem is that wide size variant, and being able to predict demand for each one of them. And a lot of companies that we work with, a lot of CPG companies as well, they might have, a couple top sellers, like your 3 to 4 best-selling products that you kind of know what the demand is, but then you have this long tail end of your other like 200 products, and like they still compromise like 40% of your business, say, but each one of those SKUs is 40% divided by 200, and being able to predict like, hey, I'm going to sell one size 35 wide once every 2 months, is really difficult. And so we can do that using our predictive analysis, but that's something that's really difficult to do in Excel. And then I think what ends up happening is you're like, okay, I better just have like one unit on stock at all times. And that really adds up. That can be like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars of inventory that you're just keeping around just in case. And so that's one of the key, I think, indicators of success in our platform is reduction of overstock, reduction of stockouts. And that's one thing that we helped Marco like really hone in on, is like, how well is your like size 36 wide going to do versus your size 47 narrow?
And that's, huge, because the amount of SKUs you have is like the more risk you have, and and then in terms of I'm interested just in the CPG industry. Yeah. What has been and is there an optimize, like I have we have companies that start with us and they have one product and they're the one product, but is there a theme of how many SKUs you can have to optimize? I don't know if you've seen like data around
so
for certain
CPG
industries.
products specifically, they don't necessarily have as wide, because they don't have like as many size and colorway variants. But they do have a lot of volatility is what I noticed, because you have like hundreds of ingredients going into one product. You need to predict your demand across those hundreds of subcomponents, your packaging, your labels. And one thing that we realized, or we knew that was going to happen in supply chain, we're all like, oh, we just need like the one straw that breaks the camel's back. And that was the pandemic. And then people's like key raw material, one ingredient out of like 80 would be stuck somewhere. And then they couldn't run their production line, they'd stock out. And so what we did was help our CPG companies predict like, okay, based on these changing lead times, like when is it going to arrive? When are you going to be back in stock? So you can tell your retailers, across your 80 different raw materials per product. And when you go 80 times, like, let's say you have like 200 products, then it gets quite high. But even for some of our customers, they have maybe 50 finished goods or 20 finished goods. But each one of them has a lot of complex raw materials, and that's where that predictiveness comes out.
And you're getting a lot of different data points just from, the sales aspect on direct consumer versus, retail. Where do you think the future of retail is with consumer behavior changing? During pandemic, and this is why we launched this show, was D2C. Everyone is going to be selling things on a direct consumer, and we're never going to stores again. And then now it's okay. Everyone needs, in person, So where do you see, and where's the data showing that the future of retail lands?
I mean, I think the big theme of 2023 has really been expansion into wholesale. So expansion to like Nordstrom, Target, Sephora, Walmart, CVS, Walgreens. And I think that is the theme for this year, but not necessarily the theme for the next 20 years. I really see, there's direct to consumer as a channel, and I think that's your most important channel in terms of communicating with your customer, getting your brand story out there. But in terms of convenience, being able to grab the product at any time, being able to touch and feel the product, I think either brick and mortar or wholesale expansion is going to be a key part of any brand strategy. And I think the reason is that allows you to scale, and scale, I would say, sustainably. I think with shipping, it is really difficult to get the product into the consumer's hands. They especially in brand discovery phase, they don't really know or trust your brand. Once they've used your product a bunch, it's easier for them to just be like, okay, go online, place the order. But especially in that early stage where they're still trying to figure out, like, is this a brand that I trust? Getting it with a widespread distribution at cost really relies on that kind of physical footprint. And so with that comes a lot of complexity. I think we've talked about, the omni-channel fulfillment, but even within direct-to-consumer, I think distributed warehousing is going to be key. Saving on those shipping costs by having your inventory distributed across the U.S. so that you only have to pay like zone 1 or 2 shipping instead of zone 9 shipping is going to be really important. And so what I really see, I guess that's a long-winded, very example-heavy way of saying that supply chain is changing. It's not going to be the linear supply chain that it was in the past. It's really going to be a complex web of moving parts, and I think that is going to be unlocked by software.
I mean, that's incredible. So, and then in terms of, what you're seeing with shipping times and all of the, distributed, that's incredible. And then what else? I just would love to just get just one case study of beauty brands that you've worked with that had a pain point, because we have a lot of beauty founders out there.
Yeah, of course.
And I love True Botanicals, or you can tell me, but just in terms of, that would be great.
Yeah, we work with a bunch of brands like True Botanicals, Juniper Ridge, Supergoop, and I think True Botanicals in particular, because their entire premise is like really organic materials, safe materials, clean beauty. They source a lot of the raw materials themselves, and so I think for them especially, they went from sourcing like several hundred to several thousand raw materials as they expanded their product line. So I think one of the things that Fuse can help unlock is that expansion of product. When you think about growing a brand, there's, you can grow your channels, but you can also grow by having new products, newness, excitement that gets people to come back to your brand. And I think that new product unlocking really comes down to efficient cash flow management and efficient raw material sourcing.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs that want to scale really quickly into, the Sephora, Ulta, CVS, you name it. What are you seeing and what advice would you give them in terms of, scaling quickly into these, I'm sure you've seen a ton of pain points, and I'd love to understand just those pain points going into retail.
Yeah. So I led Kiwi Craze expansion into Target, and not much has changed since then. You get like a 200-page volume of all the labeling requirements that you need on your products that, tell you have to have exactly what point font and what like sans serif font. And, there's that complexity in that you'll probably have to change your packaging drastically for Target. But there's also the complexity of being able to understand your demand from a retailer. And with a lot of these large retailers, they have specific inventory requirements. Like you have to hold like 10,000 units at any point in time so that I can place my PO and you ship it out within a week. And most people, your product does not have a 1-week lead time. So that means holding it. But then they say, hey, we need 10,000 units at any given time. And then they place a PO for like 20,000 or 2,000. Right. So how do you predict, are they going to place that PO for like 20,000 randomly next week, or are they going to place a PO for 2,000 and then you have 8,000 units left over? And so one of the things that we help our customers do is really look at the consumption data, like at the doors. How much are the Target stores door by door like consuming? And that's actually going to inform the next purchase much better than, hey, okay, we shipped like 3 times to them this year and it was like 50,000 units each. But we don't know when that next PO, like one was 2 weeks apart and then the next one was like 6 months apart. That's really hard
that could ruin your business.
That could ruin your business.
I mean, if you're self-funding or whatever it is, and
I was at an event.
You're predicting that 20,000 units are going to Target and then you have 2,000.
I was at an event where a female founder was talking about how when they expanded to Target, she literally had to go and fundraise in 2 weeks to fund a PO for Target.
Literally have a friend doing that right now.
Yeah.
and specifically Target. So
yes. Yeah. Target and Walmart are like kind of like the two that are like the worst at it. And just confidentially, I guess, or not so confidentially. But
she's like, my data says. We'd like to get more data on how to execute and we do want them. We definitely want them. We just don't want to. We just don't want to have to fundraise while we're trying to serve
fundraise
them.
To like suddenly place a large PO and then like you never know when that's going to happen again, right? Yeah. And she literally had to like go around to all her investors and new angels and just try to close around in 2 weeks at like whatever terms she could get. And so I think it's about planning ahead, figuring out like, and really working with the right broker. But no matter what buying plan they give you, it's going to be wrong. So it's really about looking at the consumption data to really predict the next PO.
So I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience because I think, and even just if I'd love, because this is part of this is learning about war stories and how you got through them. And so I would love just, actually, Jason, you're going to tell me about Tushy and you're going to talk to me about, like how inventory worked for you and just how you're using, just would love to know what you're doing on that front. And then anybody else has questions. Just tell us about just some problems that you've solved from scaling.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the biggest problem was scaling during the pandemic. You mentioned, Rachel, not being able to, like toilet paper being predictable and suddenly unpredictable. Yeah. And so for my business... So we're called Tushy, and we sell bidets and other kind of interesting, beautifully designed bathroom products. But our hero product is a bidet attachment, which turns any toilet into a spa-like bidet experience for $100. So for us, we went from at the time selling like $30,000 of product a day to $1 million of product a day, because nobody could get toilet paper, and so suddenly they were interested in a bidet, but they were too scared to buy our product. And suddenly they're like, oh yeah, I'm on Tushy's mailing list. I better buy that product. So for us, the inventory issue is largely getting it from our factory in Asia to the United States. So we solved that by like in lots of ways, like calling the main factory we work with and being like, can you work 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week? And they're like, okay, we're going to make money from it, great. So that was the first step. And then the next step for us to solve that was we didn't want to wait for literally the slow boat from China coming to U.S. with container loads of tushies. So we found a 3PL locally to ship directly to consumers in the U.S. and Canada. So just literally we would like FedEx every single product from China to the U.S. to Canada. And so that, that cost a boatload of money, but we justified it because we didn't have to do any marketing during that period, because every newspaper was calling us and wanting to know about like, oh, we hear that you guys have solved the toilet paper crisis because people are just buying bidets and they don't need toilet paper. So that was like free marketing. So we took, the $30 that we would spend to win a customer and put it towards shipping. So no, that was our interesting inventory issue. I don't know, that doesn't pertain to everybody, but since you asked, Meghan, I shared.
Yeah, I mean, what are
right now our question, and I asked you this before, Rachel, also, like for us, the issue currently is going into retail because we're in Walmart, we're getting interest from 4 or 5 different large retailers, and just for us, like we're just having trouble predicting demand, like they'll be like, and we want to place this big order, and then they'll place an order for like 5,000 units or something, yep, or 500 units, and we're like, wait, we just, and my team is scrambling to like prepare and create new packaging, and then the order will come in for like 1,000 units, and we're like, yeah, that's not really interesting to us. So it's really unpredictable. That's our current issue.
The classic retailer story. Yeah, I mean, and I talked a little bit about the consumption data, but another thing is like, retailer specific packaging, being able to put it together and then break it down and repackage it in whatever way that you can reuse the inventory is really key. So even for customers that don't tend to deal with raw materials, packaging is usually one big reason why people use Fuse, is so that they can say like, okay, well, in Target specific packaging, my product looks like this, but without Target specific packaging, it actually costs this and looks like that. So being able to really redo those case packs and package sizes are really important, especially different retailers have different requirements too for pallets. So then you're gonna have to like redo the pallet for Walmart and then redo it for Costco. So being able to make sure that you can track that is key.
One of my friends started Vega, the protein company or protein powder company back in the day. And he said if he had gone into Costco without knowing how to, and they were actually a big brand before they went into Costco. If he had gone into Costco, they said he would have gone bankrupt because they hadn't, like he hadn't thought through. It was like, the terms that they give you, all of those things. He's like, there is no way that we even knew how to go into it. And it was a combination of figuring out like the supply chain and figuring out like how not to, but again, if he had had your software, it'd be probably a different story. What other questions do you guys have on supply chain, future of supply chain, logistics? What pain points? Are you guys experiencing any pain points going into retail? Oh, yes. What is your name? I like when people, stand up and tell us
Hi, Yoji Cole, and I'm with Vendo. One of the things that we do is we work with a lot of brands on marketplaces. And so one of the things that we're always solving for is, supply chain issue, packaging issues with Amazon versus Target versus Walmart and so on and so forth. So I was wondering, do you guys work with that in the marketplace, and how do you, help people with, packaging for Amazon for the margin consideration, and then as well as, first, how does that work, and can you do that across those different retailers?
Yeah,
marketplaces?
So Amazon is its own beast. It's a retailer, and that has very specific pallet requirements as well, barcode requirements. But it also, you don't have full control over your listings. Sometimes you can get people hijacking your listings. They mix inventory together. Even if you buy it from a seller, because that pick location has whoever has that product, it can get mixed into it. So it's kind of its own beast. But there is a distinction between FBA and FBM. So fulfilled by Amazon versus fulfilled by merchant. Obviously, Amazon promotes and gives better terms to anyone that's FBA. However, with FBM, you have full control. You can't, people can't sneak counterfeits into your product. And so that's an entire discussion on its own. And I think a lot has been written online about like how to navigate Amazon. I think the difficulty is navigating when Amazon you no longer need that pallet and now you need to ship a Target into Target requirements. For that, I really think it's working with a really skilled 3PL that has experience in it. A lot of times people are choosing 3PL based on cost, but I really think like, cost is obviously important, but experience is super important as well. Different 3PLs specialize in different things. Some of them are they know Amazon like pallets like the back of their hand, and some 3PLs will be like, yeah, we can do it. Just like tell us what to do. We'll be able to make it work. And that's where you usually run into issues. So I really recommend that people vet their 3PLs and ask the right questions about like, have you worked with Target before? Have you worked with Walmart before? Because that's gonna really influence like how smooth that transition goes.
And then I want to know, because I know that you're building this for the long game. So where do you see Fuse, I always like to say, what's the future? And what you say actually turns into what the reality is. So it's the power of of saying the words and having it happen. So what do you see the future of Fuse being?
From a industry perspective, the big players in our space are SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft Dynamics is like trying to make a comeback. And I think the reality is like I said, most software in the space, like you can look up their IPOs, it's all like 96, 97. And so what we really hope to be is the new, not just ERP, but true like inventory optimization, end-to-end supply chain provider in the space. And so our like unofficial motto, I'm from Hawaii. And so
where in Hawaii are you from?
I'm from Honolulu.
Oh, it's wonderful.
But we like to say, buy Oracle and take back the island of Lanai. So that's really where we'll be in 20 years.
I can't wait. I can't wait for you to own the island of Lanai.
Give it back to the Hawaiian people.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Rachel.
Yes,
this is
absolutely.
wonderful.
It was a pleasure. And, I'll be around. So if you have any supply chain questions, I'm happy to give my opinion.
Thanks.